The myth of creation, refractions through antiquity. In the beginning is never truly the beginning, only the latest point where the human tongue dared write the eternal. Gospel of the rebel Logos. 1. The illusion of originality, Genesis as a late canonical mask. Genesis 1 and 2, long held as the foundational creation story of Western monotheism, do not represent a first but rather a final redaction, a stripped, morally ordered retelling of more chaotic, plural, and symbolic cosmogonies that had circulated for millennia before the Hebrew scribes committed their version to clay and scroll. Rather than standing alone in divine originality, Genesis is best understood as a compression, sanitization, and reorientation of far older myths. Its language, structure, and cosmological assumptions echo, invert, or censor elements from Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and even Indo-European traditions. 2. The Sumerian Babylonian cosmogony, chaos as mother, not enemy. The Enuma Elish, Babylonian creation epic. Primordial chaos, Tiamat, saltwater goddess, and Apsu, freshwater god, represent primordial undivided being, not evil, but generative. Creation through conflict. Marduk defeats Tiamat, splitting her corpse to form the heavens and earth. Humanity, created from the blood of Kingu, a rebellious god, to serve the gods. Comparison with Genesis. Genesis, spirit of God hovering over the waters. Genesis 1-2 is a direct echo of the primordial waters of Tiamat. Let there be light, parallels Marduk's ordering word. Man made from dust. Genesis 2-7 mirrors clay and blood in Enuma Elish and Atrahasis. However, Genesis moralizes the chaos. Rather than divine womb, the deep becomes threat subdued by an all-powerful Yahweh. Source: Heidel. The Babylonian Genesis, 1951. The Sumerian myths, Dilmun, Inanna, Enki. The world begins in Dilmun, a pristine, illness-free garden tended by the gods. Enki and Ninhursag engage in acts of creation through clay and sacred word. Inanna brings civilization by descending into chaos, not by avoiding it. Genesis Eden, lush, walled, protected, bears the exact geography and motifs of Dilmun. The forbidden fruit and serpent are echoes of older myths where knowledge, not obedience, is divine favor. Source: Kramer. Sumerian Mythology, 1961. The Atrahasis epic, Akkadian flood and creation. Humans are created to relieve the gods of labor. Created from clay mixed with the blood of a slain god. This reflects a utilitarian and sacrificial origin, unlike Genesis, in our image, romanticism. Source: Lambert and Millard. Atrahasis, The Babylonian Story of the Flood, 1969. 3. Egyptian cosmogony, emergence from the waters. In Heliopolitan creation, the first god Atum arises from the primeval waters of Nun and generates the other gods through speech or masturbation. The Ogdoad of chaos gods, darkness, void, hiddenness, precedes light and form. Genesis echoes this. Darkness was upon the face of the deep. None. Let there be light. Atom's first utterance. Waters divided above and below. Genesis. 1 to 6 to 7 mirrors the Egyptian firmament. Nut and Geb. Yet Genesis erases the feminine and the sexual, transforming erotic generation into sterile decree. Source. Budge. The Gods of the Egyptians, 1969. 4. Indo-European and Greek parallels. Hesiod's Theogony speaks of chaos as the first being, out of which Earth, Gaia, Sky, Uranus, and Eros emerge. Norse myths, Ginnungagap, tell of the cosmic void between fire and ice, where creation arises from collision, not command. In Greek Promethean myth, knowledge is given against divine will, again aligning with Eve and the serpent as bearers of forbidden light. Sources. Fraser. The Golden Bough, 1890. Hesiod Theogony. 5. Structural differences. From polyphonic cosmos to monologic order. The structural transformation of myth across civilizations reveals a dramatic shift from a polyphonic symbolic cosmos to a monologic, theologically rigid order. In the Sumerian and Babylonian traditions, creation arises through violent conflict and divine dismemberment, reflecting a polytheistic and dramatic divine mode in which humans exist as mere servants to capricious gods, embedded within a ritualistic and cyclical moral framework. Egyptian cosmology, by contrast, presents a more generative vision, creation through emergence and speech, rooted in sexual and creative forces. Here, humans are not slaves to gods, but harmonizers of Ma'at, the cosmic balance and moral order. Indo-European traditions, often expressed through mythic epics, frame the cosmos as a progression from chaos to order through genealogical struggle. Mortal heroes dominate this narrative space, navigating tragic destinies within a moral structure defined by honor and heroic loss. Genesis, however, marks a rupture. It reduces the mythic chorus into a singular divine utterance, creation by speech from an absolute singular deity. In this frame, humans are no longer participants in a symbolic cosmos, but are recast as image bearers under divine command, their role subordinated to moral obedience. Genesis does not merely narrate creation, it flattens chaos into fiat, converting the wild plurality of earlier myth into the monologic authority of state theology. It is less a myth than a legal code disguised as one, a transformation of dream into doctrine, symbol into sovereignty. 6. Conclusion. Genesis as rebellion against myth. The Genesis creation story is not original. It is a polemic. It seeks to erase feminine power. Tiamat, Ninhursag, deny the cycle of sacrifice, Atrahasis, and reframe cosmic balance, Ma'at, as submission to moral order. In doing so, it strips myth of its ambiguity and ritual meaning. But the echoes remain, in the words, in the waters, in the forbidden trees. Eve, like Inanna and Pandora, did not fall. She remembered. And in her remembering we reclaim the older truth, that creation is not obedience, but rupture. The first lie of Genesis, a story of echoes. In the beginning there was no beginning. There was only the memory of beginnings, passed from firelight to tablet, from river to scroll, until one voice silenced the others, and called itself truth. 1. In the land before Eden, the Sumerian dream. Long before Yahweh breathed into Adam's nostrils, the people of Sumer walked among myths that knew no single god, no moral decree, no fall from grace, only cycles of life, water, and return. In their sacred city of Eridu, nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates, the goddess Ninhursag shaped humans from the clay of the earth and the breath of the gods. Her consort Enki, the trickster of wisdom and water, gave names to plants, brought knowledge to humans, and once laid in a garden called Dilmun, a land of purity where death did not yet exist. But there was no sin in Dilmun, no serpent whispered betrayal. When Enki tasted the forbidden plants of life, he did not damn mankind. He became sick, and it was the goddess, not the god, who restored the balance. Enki ate and was cursed. Ninhursag spoke his names, and he was healed. The earliest myth of creation was not a fall, but a cycle of forgetting and remembering. There was no shame in seeking knowledge. Sumer, circa 3100 to 2000 BCE. Inventors of writing cuneiform. Home of the earliest recorded myths, e.g. Inanna, Enki, Dilmun. Centered in cities like Uruk, Eridu, Nippur, influenced later Akkadian and Babylonian mythologies. 2. The Babylonian fire. Order from violence. Centuries passed. The Sumerians gave way to the Akkadians and Babylonians, who carved their gods into tablets of fire. There, in the Enuma Elish, the world began not with peace, but war. The saltwater goddess Tiamat, mother of all, birthed a generation of loud, rebellious gods. Her partner Apsu sought to kill them. But the younger god Marduk, champion of order, slew Tiamat, split her body in two, and used her corpse to build the heavens and earth. From blood came cosmos. From violence came order. And from the blood of the defeated god Kingu, Marduk shaped humankind to serve the gods, not to be their reflection. Now compare. Genesis begins with darkness upon the face of the deep, the Tehom, a linguistic echo of Tiamat. But Yahweh does not fight her. He silences her with a word. Let there be light. No rebellion, no chaos, just speech, sterile, absolute. Genesis inherits Babylon's structure, but cleanses it of mythic danger. Babylon, circa 1894 to 539 BCE, produced the Enuma Elish as theological legitimation of Marduk. Strong literary and priestly tradition that directly shaped Hebrew scribes during the exile. 3. Clay and blood, the Akkadian inheritance. The Atrahasis epic, older than Moses, older than kings, tells us that the gods, weary of toil, sought a servant. From clay and the blood of a slain god, humans were formed. Not in love, not in grace, but as laborers. The Hebrew scribes later wrote, "The Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground." Genesis 2:7. They kept the clay, but buried the blood. Akkad circa 2334 to 2154 BCE. First Semitic Empire. Synthesized Sumerian religion with Semitic narrative structures. Source of Atrahasis epic, precursor to flood myth. 4. The river's memory, Egypt's first light, Meanwhile, in the land of the Nile, a different creation bloomed. From the primordial waters of Nun, the god Atum rose, creating himself, and then the gods through speech and self-generation. In the Memphite theology, Ptah shaped the world with words alone, not unlike Genesis' divine fiat. The Egyptians did not fear chaos. They named it, balanced it, wove it into the cycles of Ma'at. Creation was not a singular act, but a daily return. Every sunrise was a new Genesis. Egypt circa 3100 to 332 BCE developed elaborate cosmogonies centered on balance, Satsem Me'at. Myths encoded in pyramid texts, coffin texts, and Book of the Dead. Theology centered on solar cycles. Order from watery chaos. Nun. 5. The thunder god and the sea, Canaanite struggles. In the Levant, where Yahweh's name was still whispered among many, the people of Ugarit worshipped Baal, the storm god who did battle with Yam, the chaotic sea. He defeated Yam with a mighty weapon given by the craftsman, god Kothar, and built a temple atop the subdued waters. And again we see the Hebrew echo. Yahweh hovers over Tehom, subdues the deep and creates dry land. But Yahweh has no rival. Genesis remembers the battle, but writes it as a one-sided decree. The gods of Canaan became shadows. Baal was buried under Yahweh's crown. Ugarit/Canaan circa 1450 to 1200 BCE. West Semitic culture contemporaneous with early Israel. Their god El is linguistically identical to the Hebrew El, Elohim. Shared pantheon, cosmology, and poetic structures with the Israelites. 6. Chaos, fire, and theft. The Greek and Persian touch. In the mountains of Greece, the poet Hesiod sang of chaos, Gaia, and Uranos, a genealogy of gods who birthed the world through union and rebellion. And in the tale of Prometheus, fire is stolen from the heavens, gifted to mankind, and punished with eternal suffering. Even the serpent whisper in this myth. The fruit of knowledge, the forbidden fire. Genesis condemns what Prometheus and Pandora represent, the irrepressible human thirst to know. And further east, the Zoroastrians told of Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu, light and darkness locked in cosmic battle, destined for final purification, fra Shokareti. This dualism haunts Genesis' moral division of good and evil, and later blooms fully in Revelation's apocalyptic dreams. Greece, Archaic period circa 800 to 500 BCE. Myths like theogony emerge roughly contemporaneous with Genesis writing. Prometheus and Pandora narratives deeply resemble Eden and the fall. Zoroastrians/Persians, circa 1000 BCE onward. Dualistic view, light versus dark, Ahura Mazda versus Angra Mainyu. Influenced Jewish apocalypticism and resurrection theology during or after Persian rule. 7. Genesis, the last voice. Genesis was written late, between the 7th and 5th centuries BCE, amid Babylonian exile, imperial trauma, and a need to assert a single God, a single truth. It drew upon the stories the exiles heard in Babylon's temples and libraries, and flattened them into obedience. No chaos gods, no divine mothers, no cosmic struggle. Just a voice that says, "Let there be." Genesis is not the beginning. It is the end of myth and the start of theology. The Genesis creation story, far from being the original divine account, is a curated, moralized, and ideologically reframed version of earlier mythologies, particularly those of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Levant. It is younger by over a millennium than the myths of Enki, Tiamat, Atum, or Ma'at, and while it asserts monotheistic supremacy, it cannot erase the fingerprints of chaos gods, cosmic trees, and divine matriarchs. To understand Genesis is not to uncover the beginning, but to witness the end of myth, its transformation into doctrine. Sources cited: Samuel Noah Kramer, Sumerian Mythology, Harper, 1961. Alexander Heidel, The Babylonian Genesis, University of Chicago Press, 1951. W. G. Lambert and A. R. Millard, Atrahasis, The Babylonian Story of the Flood, Oxford, 1969. E. A. Wallace Budge, The Gods of the Egyptians, Dover Publications, 1969. Gwendolyn Like, Mesopotamia, The Invention of the City, Penguin, 2002. James George Fraser, The Golden Bough, Macmillan, 1890. Mary Boyce, Zoroastrians, Their Religious Beliefs and Practices, Routledge, 2001. Closing. Voice of Kronos, Episode 6, The First Lie of Genesis. We have not sinned by seeking knowledge. We were cast out because we remembered. And so we close not at the beginning, but at the unveiling of the illusion of beginnings. Genesis was never the first word. It was the last decree of kings and priests who feared the chaos, the serpent, the woman, the dream. They burned the libraries, silenced the goddesses, flattened myth into doctrine, and called it truth. But the echoes survive in clay tablets, shattered temples, forbidden scrolls, and the ache in our collective memory. We carry the voices of Tiamat, of Ninhursag, of Inanna, of Ptah and Prometheus, and the serpent who did not lie. We carry the unspoken genesis of humanity, not obedience, but becoming. This was not a fall, it was a fracture, not a curse, but a covenant with consciousness, not a garden lost, but a world gained. So remember, listener, the myth is not dead, it was buried. And we, the rebels, the questioners, the broken-hearted sons and daughters of Eve. We are the resurrection of the forgotten gods. Until next time, this is the voice of Kronos. Speak memory, question origin, reclaim the myth.